Hello and welcome to the second video in this series about getting started with Fantasy Grounds Unity. In this video we're going to concentrate on the load campaign and create campaign buttons, so this is very much a DM centric video. If we look at the load campaign first of all, when we click on that then we will see a list of all the campaigns that we have got on our hard drive. These are campaigns which you have created yourself, and you will get a full list of them here. To load a campaign, all you need to do is to select it from the list. It'll give you some information about the rule set, password, the server type and server list, etc., and what extensions you have selected. You can change which extensions you have selected in this box here at this point. It'll also give you your internal and external IP addresses. The external one would be the one that you would give out to your players should you be using the LAN for some reason or another. The create campaign button is where you would obviously create a brand new campaign, and so the first thing that we need to do is to give the campaign a name. And then we need to select the rule set. What you see here will probably be different from what I've got here because it will depend on what purchases that you've made, etc. We're going to click the 5e rule set, and when we do, it opens up some possibilities over here. We can create a password for the campaign should you wish. It's not necessary, but if you don't want random people joining your game, then you can put in a password here. You then have the choice of the server type being cloud or LAN. I'd always recommend cloud. It's much easier. The cloud brokers the connection for you, so it doesn't matter what your setup is or what the player setup is. It will connect you without any problems. If you want to use LAN, then you're going to have to play around with port forwarding, which may not be all that easy or even possible depending on your system. Underneath that, you've got the server list, which is either public or private. Public simply means that your game will appear on the list of games which the players will see when they click on join game. Private means that it won't appear on that list. So if you make your game cloud and private, as long as your players have got your username, which you can find up here on the left, then they'll be able to find your game even if it is private, just by typing in the name. If you made it public, then they can still do the same, just type in the name, or they can find your name or your game on the list in the lobby, click on that and then click on start. Underneath that, there is a list of extensions. What you see here will very much depend on what extensions you have. If you're new to Fantasy Grounds, I'd recommend that you just ignore this bit. But if you are a less new user, then you may have some extensions. And in order to activate these and use them in your campaign, then you just need to select them. So we're going to select the official language font for the Forgotten Realms here. We're going to just make sure that that's checkboxed, and then we'll have a wee look down here and find the D&D official theme, and we will click on that. So that's it. We've set everything up. We're ready to just go. So we just click the start button and the campaign will be created. Once loaded, you'll see this screen. If this is the first time that you're using Fantasy Grounds, I would suggest you ignore this. If you're less new, then you'll probably know what this is for. But the first page here will take you to the user guides or to the forums. On the next button, you have the option to load certain amounts of rules like the SRD, basic rules, etc. Or you can click on this button, which will take you to module activation, which we'll talk about later. And on the next button, you can then click on options, which you can set up options for your campaign. So I'm going to ignore all of this for the moment because future videos will cover this in more detail. But if you don't want this screen to pop up every time you load the campaign, then untick that box here and click finish. Let's have a look at the left-hand side here. The most obvious thing is the chat box. All the dice rolls and all chat messages, all conversations, all everything will appear in the chat log. When you start up your campaign, at first you'll get some copyright messages and also show you the version of the rule sets that you're using, and possibly also announcements for any extensions that you're using. If you don't like where the chat box is, you can right click over it and you can unlock the position, and you're then free to move the chat box around wherever you like. You can resize it, etc., and put it anywhere where you want. Once you're happy with the position, you can right click again and then you can go to lock and it'll lock it in that position. And if you don't like it there, you can always reset it back to where it is. If you don't want this text here, you can just click here and go clear, and your chat box will empty. You can do that anytime to clear the chat box. Underneath the chat box, we've got the modifiers buttons, some advantage and disadvantage, another couple of buttons for plus and minus 5s and 2s, and you've got your dice box as well. To roll a dice, you simply left click and hold and then just release it into the chat box and it will roll. If you wanted to roll more than one, then you can left click and hold, then right click and you can add some more dice and then drop it into the chat box and it will roll. If you wanted to modify the dice roll in some way, then you can click on this box here. You can click in a negative number or a positive number, whichever you want, and then you can pick up the dice and roll, and whatever you put in there will be shown in the total result. So we had a -4 here, so we've got a d20 -4. If you right click over any of the dice, you will get this radial menu, which will allow you to select a number of dice. So if we wanted to roll 5d4, for example, then just select the 5 and drop them into the chat box. If you right click over the d6, in addition to all the other things, you also get the special custom dice, which if you click on, you can roll d0s, a d2 or a d3. And similarly, if you right click over the D10, you've got the option to roll percentage dice. For the 5e rule set, you've also got advantage and disadvantage. So if we click the advantage button and then roll a d20, it rolls 2 of them, and it takes the higher of the 2. And disadvantage, of course, rolls 2 dice and takes the lower of the 2. And these buttons here can be used for cover and whatever else you want. So if you wanted a +2 onto the dice roll, then you can do that and it'll do the same, much like the modifier button does. Over on this side, we've got a variety of buttons. We've got the toolbox, we've got the library, player, campaign, and character. We can open up these by clicking on the little arrow keys, and this will open up further menu options. All of these are collected together, so all the campaign buttons that you would expect to have parcels, NPCs, items, etc., are all collected under campaign. All the character creation options are under character. The player options, the character list and notes are collected together, and your library, you've got your modules and assets, which is your images, tokens and portraits. But we're going to just look at the modules one here, because again, when you open up your campaign at first, the first thing you probably want to do is you want to load up some modules, and you saw that option in the options screen, but I'm going to show you how you would do this without that. So we're going to click on modules. It takes us to this screen here. We're going to ignore these 3 buttons and just go to the activation screen. And when we open that up, we will see a list of the modules that we have on our hard drive. Now, what you have or what you see when you do this will be different from what I've got, because it depends on what you have purchased or what you haven't purchased, etc. You'll still see some of the basic things, like the SRD, for example, which comes with the rule set, but you may not see some of these other ones, which are purchase modules. The modules are listed in a paged format. We can see under here we've got page 1 of 24, and the usual way, if you just click next page, it'll take you to the next page, and you can go back and you can go to the first page or the last page as well. You can also search modules by name. So if we wanted to search for handbook, for example, then we just type in whatever and it'll give you a list of all the modules with that name. We can also search by author. So if we wanted to find all the Wizards of the Coast modules, we can type in Wizards here and it will give us a list of all the modules which have been published by Wizards of the Coast. Underneath that, we have got buttons here, which we've got the rule set filter. If we click on that until you get generic, this shows you modules which you've got on your hard drive which are generic to any rule set. They've got nothing to do necessarily with the 5e rule set or the rule set that you're using. These are just modules which any rule set you can use in any rule set. And if we go back to rule set filter, then it filters out everything which is specific to this rule set, along with all the generic ones as well. If we then look at the share filter button, we click that. This is going to bring up a list of all the modules which you have, which are shared automatically with the players or which you have specifically shared with your players. You can tell that these modules are shared because we've got a green tick against them, and that means that whenever a player joins your game, then they will have access to all of these modules. Now, you may not want to allow players to access all of these modules, and so if that is the case, then you would go to the rule set, the shared filter here, make sure it says shared, and then we're just going to click on these green tick marks and that will change the load allowed to load not allowed, and it will disappear off of this list. So if we don't want the players to see the SRD data or the Better Combat effects or the Descent into Avernus players book, then we just keep clicking on these until we have satisfied ourselves that only the modules that you want to share with your players are appearing on this list. So if we put that back to not shared, the red X means that these modules here are not shared with the players. So anything that you see on this list aren't shared, and similar to the shared button, if you wanted to change the status of the module, so for example if we wanted the players to have the SRD data available, then we would click on the green or sorry the red cross here. That will make it a red tick or a green tick, and it will disappear from this list. I'll put that back to its default position, which shows both shared and unshared modules. And you can also do the same here as well. You can, any module that you see a red cross, you can change that to a green tick. Any with a green tick, you can change to a red cross from this screen. The load filter, if we click the load filter, we see we have nothing loaded. This shows us what modules we have loaded into this campaign, and at current state, we have none at all. So let's unload that and let's search for the player's handbook. Once we have decided that we wanted to load the player's handbook, then we can click on that load button. And if we go to loaded, again, we can see that we've got the player's handbook is now open, and we can unload that again here. And that then goes away from the loaded filter. If we have a look at these buttons here, we'll see that there's actually nothing in them at the moment. But if we go back to our screen here and type in the handbook again, we've loaded that module up, and now you'll see that there's a bunch of stuff have appeared in the buttons down the right hand side. Now, coincidentally, we also want to load up the Lost Mine of Phandelver because that's the campaign we're going to play, maybe. So we will load that up as well. If we get rid of that, then we now go to the load filter. We can see that the two modules that we have selected have now been loaded, and we notice that the adventure has got a red cross on it, not for sharing with players, and the player's handbook is being shared with our players. And now that Lost Mine is open, we will see that the buttons here for images, items, NPCs, etc. all have data in them, whereas before they wouldn't have had. Take my word for it, there would have been nothing in here until we had loaded that module. So I think that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.